So this is part 3 of our 3-part series on Judges, Joshua, Judges, and Kings. And actually, when we say Kings, I'm talking about 1 Samuel. Actually, it all comes after Judges, but this study of Kings and our story of how this goes. So the key here, just like the other lessons, is exposure. We don't have a lot of exposure to these prophetic books. The idea is after Deuteronomy, after the Torah ends, Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, these sort of, these are, by the way, very dense books, very long stories, and there's a great deal in them, and we don't get to read a lot about them, but they are, at least they are written to be the origin of our monarchy, of our kingdom, how the Jewish kingdom came to be, and then how it ended up splitting into Israel and Judah until its destruction. So,
can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
These books, I was thinking about the last lesson, they're part of our heritage, but are they in other, are they included in the books for Catholicism?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, because I get sometimes when things are quoted, I'm not sure if it's the Torah and the extra books or it's the New Testament.
Oh, no. New Testament is takes place in 1st century CE. This takes place in 1000 BC.
Okay.
So this is the formation of our kingdom, and then the building of the first temple occurs after this. The first temple isn't destroyed until 586 BCE. The second temple occurs in the New Testament, 70 CE.
Okay.
So there's
it's
quite a bit different.
timeline that I have to.
Yes. So there is a line of kings that occurs from 1000 BCE to 586 BC, and then when the kingdom ends, but it's rebuilt during the Persian period for ritual purposes, the temple. But we have multiple kings that ruled, and then split kingdoms. The northern territory of Israel and the southern territory of Judah were 2 kingdoms and things like that. So all of this is our history of moving from tribes and families to an army, to nation states, that sort of tribal states, to, at least according to the text, coming together and becoming one kingdom.
Okay.
So no, there's this is certainly in our canon. We would not be teaching on New Testament scripture. What we're going to read, and there's a lot of text, so I'm going to have you read with me, is we have moved on from Joshua discusses the conquest of certain parts of what we would call the Holy Land. At that point, the Israelites are mostly an army. Judges, this whole book of Judges that comes before this, what we're going to read today, is all about charismatic leaders / prophetic sort of leaders that rise, do good things, bad things, whatever it is. They die out. Then another judge comes up. Okay, so these are regional leaders that rise up. The last session that we read about was about Deborah. Deborah was a judge who was this sort of mystical, God-inspired being, whatever it was. We are moving now away from prophetic succession into monastic, monarchical sort of succession. So if we remember the first session, we talked about what it looked like for Moses to hand power down to Joshua, and we saw the equivalent later with Elijah handing things down to Elisha. Here we have a prophet named Samuel who's going to guide all this together, who's a prophet slash judge, sort of both in that way. But we're going to give rise to people who are chosen by God to reign as king. Okay, and there's a lot of history when it comes to the idea of a king. If we read in Deuteronomy, there's all kinds of yeses and nos about kings, and there's a lot of animosity towards forming a monarchy because the Israelites did not want to be like all the other nations with kings. But eventually we make it there, and we get Saul, David, Solomon, and then after Solomon's death, we have the split kingdom. At least this is what the story tells us, where we have the northern kingdom of Israel, which is the much larger kingdom, and then the southern kingdom of Judah. The northern kingdom of Israel reigns until 722, where it's destroyed by Assyria. The southern kingdom hangs on a little bit longer until 586 BCE, destroyed by the Babylonians. But from 500 years before that, we have lots of kings and we have lots of stories. So these stories after Judges, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel and 1 Kings and 2 Kings, tell the story, or at least the story that they wanted to tell, about how we morphed into a monarchy. Okay? So we'll read them in sort of sections of, so we don't have to read through the entire thing. Okay, so in 1 Samuel 8:4, and then I have another section in 8:19. We read about Samuel, who's the prophet judge, who is tasked with moving us into a monarchy. Okay, so someone want to read this paragraph where it says Samuel's task?
Okay, I
Yeah,
can
sure.
start. All the elders of Israel assembled and came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him, "You have grown old, and your sons haven't followed your ways. Therefore, appoint a king for us, to govern us like all other nations." Samuel was displeased that they said, "Give us a king to govern us." Samuel prayed to Yahweh, and Yahweh replied to Samuel, "Heed the demand of the people in everything they say to you. For it is not you that they have rejected. It is me they have rejected as their king. Like everything else they have done ever since I brought them out of Egypt to this day, forsaking me and worshiping other gods, so they are doing to you. Heed their demand, but warn them solemnly and tell them about the practices of any king who will rule over them."
Okay, pause for a moment. So a couple of things going on here, okay? Samuel is this judge, and the way that we were reading about things in the previous section of our Tanakh, Judges, his son or someone else, he was supposed to pick someone else to go after him, but he hasn't. So the people are saying, look, you're old, we need a new ruler. Make us a king, right? Now, as you can see, first of all, Samuel is not big on kings for lots of reasons, but he goes to God, and God says, in sort of this reluctant way, God says, okay, if this is what they want, give it to them. And what we don't have here, because I don't have the time, is in between 8:4 and 8:19 here, is Samuel gives this long speech about how kings are bad, about how it's a horrible thing. Because what Samuel, the prophet sort of judge, is experiencing here is a shift from theocracy to monarchy, and he doesn't understand how you can do this. It would be a betrayal of God and divine rule for him. But he goes to God, and God says, do it. So Samuel says, well, okay, if you say so. Okay? Keep on going. 1 Samuel
But
8:19.
the people wouldn't listen to Samuel's warning. No, they said, we must have a king over us that we may be like all the other nations. Let our king rule over us and go out at our head and fight our battles. When Samuel heard all that the people said, he reported it to Yahweh, and Yahweh said to Samuel, heed their demands and appoint a king for them. Samuel then said to the men of Israel, all of you go home.
Yeah, he's not happy about that.
Yes.
Okay, he's not happy. For a lot of reasons. One, no one likes to hear "Get out, we want someone new." Two, his lineage is now going to end. Okay, so it's now someone else's lineage that is going to start. Okay, so that's not good either. Also, this is how it's been going for a while, that there's a judge, and that this is how it would sort of. So this changes the entire section of what, or the idea of what the Israelites have been doing. So as a prophet and a judge, he's not pleased. He's not happy about it.
There's some hint why they really want. They need someone to go to war, to fight. And the old
Correct.
Samuel
Correct.
wouldn't go to fight.
Correct. That is true. So that's very, very true. So they do need, there are wars that occurred all through the book of Judges, right? They need some steady, powerful force to be able to go out and fight the enemies. Okay. And they're looking at all these other nations saying, look, all these other nations can fight. We're these regional tribes. We have tribes everywhere. We're not put together. We're a mess, sort of. Put us together is what the people are trying to ask for. Okay. So we have the first king that is chosen of Israel is a man named Saul, and he comes from the tribe of Benjamin, and that's going to be important for later moments. But so we'll read about how Samuel chooses Saul.
Northern tribe.
It is right in between Judah and Israel. It is right there. So it's an important choice and an interesting choice.
Mm-hmm.
So and we'll look at the map later, and we'll talk about really what are some of the indications as to it is sort of northern, right? But it's right above Jerusalem, and so the fact that it is northern is important because that would mean that maybe perhaps the northern writers were writing this part. David, on the other hand, is from Judah. He's southern, so that's a dip. So we're going to see as Saul transitions from David, maybe we're seeing a little deeper stuff in the writing. So important things to know, absolutely. So Saul the Benjaminite is chosen. Someone want to read that paragraph, 1 Samuel 9:15, and then 1 Samuel 9:17, that little paragraph there.
Now the day before Saul came, Yahweh had revealed the following to Samuel. At this time tomorrow I will send a man to you from the territory of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him ruler of my people Israel. He will deliver my people from the hands of the Philistines, for I have taken note of my people. Their outcry has come to me. As soon as Samuel saw Saul, Yahweh declared to him, this is the man that I told you would govern my people. Saul approached Samuel inside the gate and said to him, tell me, please, where is the house of the seer? And Samuel answered Saul, I am the seer. Go up ahead of me to the shrine, where you shall eat with me today. In the morning I will let you go, after telling you whatever may be on your mind. As for your asses, they strayed 3 days ago. Do not concern yourself about them, for they have been found. And for whom is all Israel yearning, if not for you and all your ancestral house? Saul replied, for I am only a Benjamite, from the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my clan is the least of all the clans of the tribe of Benjamin. Why do you say such things to me?
Okay, so this is that first encounter. So before we move forward, we are Samuel, who was originally going to be, who is a judge, he is now the last judge, and he's also being what's called the kingmaker. So there is a continuity that is building between the judge of Samuel, and he gets to go and choose, well, not really, but he gets to point out the next king, okay? Judgeship becomes then the effective cause of kingship. The last great judge, which is Samuel, he tries to turn judgeship into kingship by making it hereditary. In other words, Samuel would prefer his kids to take over, and that it would just be it would smooth over into sort of some monarchy. It doesn't happen, of course, and we read about 1 Samuel 8:1, what happened to Samuel's kids. It's not in your book, but I'll read it for you. Samuel grew old. He appointed his sons to judge over Israel. The names of the firstborn were Joel. The second was Abijah. They sat in judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not follow in his ways. They were bent on gain. They accepted bribes, and they subverted justice. In other words, Samuel's kids, no good. So his plan to make them into the kingship does not work. But there is some continuity in the fact that he gets to go pick out Saul. And as we can see from Saul, we learn about Saul. He's this very tall guy. He's okay. He's not terribly bright, but he's okay. But listen to what he's saying. He's saying, I'm from the Benjaminite. I'm a Benjaminite. I'm this little tribe and this little thing. Why are you telling me I'm going to be this big thing? Again, we can think into the minds of the authors. If the authors are northern, you can think, oh, wow, well, the first king of Israel came from this tiny little tribe. How about that? So, great. So 1 Sam 10:20.
Samuel brought forward each of the tribes of Israel, and the lot indicated that the tribe of Benjamin. Then Israel brought forward the tribe of Benjamin by its clans, and the clan of the Matrites was indicated. And then Saul, son of Kish, was indicated. But when they looked for him, he was not to be found. They inquired of Yahweh again, has anyone else come here? And Yahweh replied, yes, he is hiding among the baggage. So they ran over and brought him from there. And when he took his place among the people, he stood a head taller than all the people. And Samuel said to the people, do you see the one whom Yahweh has chosen? There is none like him among the people. And they all the people acclaimed him, shouting, long live the king. Okay.
And this is sort of how the story goes. There's these little bits of sort of funny, where's this guy? We're looking for this guy. Where is he? He's hiding, and then there's all of a sudden, he's king, long live the king. So the text is insistent that Saul is chosen, like a judge by Yahweh, meaning this is God's choice. And there is a little bit that I didn't put in your book, but I'll read 1 Samuel 9:16. We read, at this time tomorrow, I will send a man to you from the territory of Benjamin. This is God speaking to Samuel. And you shall anoint him ruler of my people Israel. He will deliver my people from the hands of the Philistines. I have taken note of my people. Their outcry has come to me. As soon as Samuel saw Saul, Yahweh said, that's the man I've told you about. So in other words, this is about military might. So he's picking Saul, who is this tall, strong warrior, to defeat the Philistines. Okay, and Saul's military action is very much that of a judge. In 1 Samuel 11, he faces an enemy, and he calls all the tribes together. That's exactly very much the judge pattern, and we'll read about that here in Saul proving his worth in battle. And all of these are steps, by the way, in how things sort of arise to the kingship. Okay, he's chosen by God, and then he proves his worth as the warrior. So in Saul proving his worth in battle, 1 Samuel 11. You want to read that?
Nahash the Ammonite marched up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. All the men of Jabesh Gilead said to Nahash, make a pact with us and we will serve you. But Nahash the Ammonite answered them, I will make a pact with you on this condition, that everyone's right eye be gouged out. I will make this a humiliation for all Israel. The elders of Jabesh said to him, give us 7 days respite so that we may send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. If no one comes to our aid, we will surrender to you. When the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul and gave this report in the hearing of the people, all the people broke into weeping.
Okay, so there's this overwhelming danger. Oh God, what are we going to do? Enter our hero, Saul.
Saul was just coming from the field driving the cattle, and Saul asked, why are the people crying? And they told him about the situation of the men of Jabesh. When he heard these things, the Spirit of God gripped Saul, and his anger blazed up. He took a yoke of oxen and cut them into pieces, and then sent by messenger throughout the territory of Israel with a warning. Thus shall be done to the cattle of anyone who does not follow Saul and Samuel into battle. Terror from the Yahweh fell upon the people, and they came out as one man. Saul mustered them in Bezek, and the Israelites numbered 300,000, the men of Judah 30,000. The messengers who had come were told, thus shall you speak to the men of Jabesh Gilead. Tomorrow, when the sun grows hot, you shall be saved. Just came and told this to the men of Jabesh Gilead. They rejoiced. The men of Jabesh then took the Ammonites. Tomorrow we will surrender to you, and you can do to us whatever you please.
Okay, Deb?
The next day, Saul divided the troops into 3 columns. At the morning watch, they entered the camp and struck down the Ammonites until the day grew hot. The survivors scattered, no 2 were left together. The people then said to Samuel, who was it said, shall Saul be king over us? Hand the men over, and we will put them to death. But Saul replied, no man shall we put to death this day, for this day Yahweh has brought forth victory to Israel. Samuel said to the people, come, let us go to Gilead and then inaugurate the monarchy. So all the people went to Gilead, and there at Gilead they declared Saul king before Yahweh. They offered sacrifices of well-being there before Yahweh, and Saul and all the men of Israel held a great celebration there.
Okay, so he goes and defeats the battle and fights the battle and defeats the enemy. Okay, but we are about to learn that he does something wrong here. Okay, they said, hand the men over and we'll put them to death, meaning that it was Yahweh's command to eviscerate the Ammonites completely. Saul says, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to offer sacrifices instead. Okay, and we're going to get to why this is so important in a moment. Okay, so what we're going to start to see, and you see we have to skip around in chapters because this is such a dense book. There's all kinds of stuff that occurs in there. We just can't read it all as much as I would like to. But there is, if we go down to where it says Saul's descent and failure.
There's a missing number of years.
Correct. So this is in our Tanakh, and this is a scribal missing something. It says Saul was something years old when he began king, and then there's another part, 2 years when he reigned over Israel. Deb, it's 1 Samuel 13:1. If you want to see in your book, I see you to see.
It may take a minute.
That's okay, but usually there's an ellipse that's put there or an asterisk or something, but it's missing. Okay, so this is a problem. So
So there's a space in the original book that it is left blank.
it's not there. I mean, there's something. They can tell that there's something missing here. It's pretty obvious. So 13:1, 1 Samuel 13:1. Deb, hang on one second. What does it say in yours?
Samuel was, and then there are ellipses.
Yep.
Years old. And the footnote says the number is lacking in the Hebrew text. Also, the precise context of the 2 years is uncertain.
Yeah.
The verse is lacking in the Septuagint.
In the Septuagint. Yeah. So let's talk about this for a moment. So besides the fact that this is ominous, it's a formal notice of his reign. And usually when you say someone reigned this many years in Israel or whatever it is, they're not going to reign much longer, or they're on their way out. Okay. But where Saul's age is supposed to be is just a gap. And others, and most scholars believe that there is a gap here before it says, and 2 years he reigned. That seems like an impossibly short time for him to reign. Scholars surmise it actually was probably supposed to be 22 years. We don't know how old he was, but it most likely was he was reigning for 22 years, not 2 years, because too much has been happening in 2 years. Okay, so really interesting here, and the scholars really have, go a little bit crazy about this. I mean, what we're dealing with here, what we're reading about here, are the vital statistics of the first king of Israel to be chosen by God and anointed by God in God's name. How is it possible that we don't know this information? That we don't know how old he was or how long he reigned, right? If they wanted the stuff in here, right, someone should have fixed it, but they didn't, right? If it had gotten lost, they could have found it again. They could have made it up. So either the scholars believe someone decided that this shouldn't be a part of Israel's memory, right? Or it's a horrible, horrible mistake, right? Either way, it's very, very suspicious that this is gone, because we see scribal error everywhere, right, throughout the Tanakh, but nothing like this. Nothing in terms of Saul, the first king of Israel. We don't even know how old he was, or we don't even know how long he reigned, right? I mean, that's a huge, huge thing. So we know that the Masoretic text is defective at this point, either on purpose or by accident. The whole sentence does not exist in the Greek translation, and as Deb said, the Septuagint, it's gone. It does not exist in that. Okay, so in that manuscript, it didn't exist. So we can either suspect then one of two things. One, it was taken out, parts of it were taken out, or that it was sort of clumsily put in, right? Sort of the reverse, that it was a textual fragment and sort of the other gaps didn't presume to fill in, meaning that the previous manuscript, which the Septuagint used, didn't need it. But the Masoretic text manuscript, they said, well, we needed to put this in, but it got sort of jumbled and mixed up. Okay, either way, this is a huge problem. Okay, it's a big problem. So Saul was something years old when he became king, and for blank 2 years he reigned over Israel. It was not 2 years, it was much longer than that, we think. Okay, now we have what we're going to read is the beginning of Saul's and his failure, what he did, and him sort of moving out of the picture a little bit. Okay, so 1 Samuel 15:13.
When Samuel came to Saul, Saul said to him, "Blessed are you of Yahweh. I have fulfilled Yahweh's command." Then what, demanded Samuel, is this bleat of sheep in my ears and the lowing of oxen that I hear?
In other words, why is there a living being? As we learned in Joshua, you're supposed to blot out people, cattle, oxen. So if Saul had done what he was supposed to do, he wouldn't hear a thing. Samuel wouldn't hear a thing. Okay?
Saul answered, "They were brought from the Amalekites, for the troops spared the choicest of the sheep and oxen for sacrificing to Yahweh your God. and we prescribed the rest. Samuel said to Saul, "Stop, let me tell you what Yahweh said to me last night." "Speak," he replied. And Samuel said, "You may look small to yourself, but you are the head of the tribes of Israel. Yahweh anointed you king over Israel, and Yahweh sent you on a mission saying, go and proscribe the sinful Amalekites, make war on them until you have exterminated them. Why did you disobey Yahweh and swoop down on the spoil in defiance of Yahweh's will?" Saul said to Samuel, "But I did obey Yahweh. I performed the mission on which Yahweh sent me. I captured King Agag of Amalek, and I proscribed Amalek, and the troops took from the spoil some sheep and oxen, the best of what had been proscribed, to sacrifice to Yahweh God at Gilgal."
Okay, so let us make ourselves clear here before we get to Samuel's beautiful little poem of rejection. If we need to understand what Saul did wrong. Saul was supposed to exterminate everything of the enemies. Instead, he leaves the choicest of animals, and he says, "I'm going to take them to sacrifice to God, to Yahweh." Okay, his intention is, let's not waste these good animals. There's no blemish on them. Just like our own, we can sacrifice them to Yahweh, right? And we can spare people, right? So, but what Samuel is telling you is, what did God command you to do? God commanded you to exterminate everything, and you didn't. But Saul argues. He said, "Well, I did. I just saved these for a ritual, for a good purpose." Right? Everyone understand the confusion here? Okay, good. So finish us up with what Samuel said.
But Samuel said, "Does Yahweh delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obedience to Yahweh's command? Sure, obedience is better than sacrifice, compliance than the fat of rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, defiance like the iniquity of teraphim. Because you rejected Yahweh's command, he has rejected you as king."
Done. Right? Now, we can talk about punishment fitting the crime and
Yes.
all of that sort of stuff, but as we read in our Torah and things like that, God is notoriously finicky about that kind of stuff. Moses isn't let into the promised land because he hit a rock. Here, Saul, who is based on good intentions, has his kingship removed because he did not obey specifically the word of God. So what Samuel is saying here in this beautiful little speech here, he's conveying the message to Saul and to the readers that doing obedience, right? He says, obedience is better than sacrifice. He says, doing what is right is more important than the RITE, than the right? Moral behavior is demanded more than ritual, okay, in terms of a king. And Samuel ends this with a poem, this denunciation and the fact that God requires obedience, not rote performance of the cult. This actually is pretty common in terms of the prophets, but God is, obedience to God means refraining from acts of exploitation rather than carrying out what God commanded, which was extermination. And he listened to what he says. For rebellion, and this is what Saul did, right? Rebellion. It's a little harsh, I think, but Saul and God is accusing him of rebellion, is as great a sin as sorcery, as divination, right? So we should ask ourselves, does the punishment fit the crime? I mean, Saul is meant to do God's will, and he saw a way of doing it that would give actually more honor to God by sacrificing these animals, right? Why waste the animals when I can offer them to Yahweh? Why not make an example of the Amalekites, of Agag, to show what Yahweh does to his enemies. But so we should feel this sort of dissatisfaction of really, that's it? He's rejected you as that's it. One little choice, which was the intention, right? So it's an interesting
And
problem here.
What is teraphim?
Some sort of idolatry we're talking about here, but it's unknown, really. Okay, so we know now, as the reader, that Deb, does yours give notes on teraphim? Does your
It has some notes.
what does it say in terms of this is 1 Samuel 15, 23. I don't know if it gives you a little note about teraphim, how it defines it.
I don't see anything.
Okay.
1523.
Okay.
Teraphim Terra is usually earth.
Yeah, in English, yeah.
But,
Not in Hebrew, yeah. So it's some sort of idolatrous sort of something. But anyway, it's bad what he's done. So Saul's rejection. So we now move away from Saul, and we got to find a new king.
So the word of Yahweh then came to Samuel. I regret that I made Saul king, for he has turned away from me and has not carried out my commands. Samuel was distressed, and treated Yahweh all night long. Early in the morning, Samuel went to meet Saul. Samuel was told Saul went to Carmel, where he ejected a monument for himself. Then he left and went on down to Gilgal. Saul said to Samuel, I did wrong to transgress Yahweh's command and your instructions, but I was afraid of the troops, and I yielded to them. Please forgive my offense and come back with me, and I will bow low to Yahweh. But yet Samuel said to Saul, I will not go back with you, for you have rejected Yahweh's command, and Yahweh has rejected you as king over Israel. As Solomon turned to leave, Saul seized the corner of his robe, and it tore. And Samuel said to him, Yahweh has this day torn the kingship over Israel away from you and has given it to another who is worthier than you. Moreover, the glory of Israel does not deceive or change his mind, for he is not human, and he should change his mind.
That he should change his mind. Okay. So a couple things. Saul asked for forgiveness, and Samuel says, nope, too late. And there's this metaphorical tearing. You're no longer the king. That sort of stuff. Teraphim, by the way, is like an oracle. It's from Zechariah and other things. So it's like idolatry. Is what
Yeah,
is that what it says?
Yeah, now that I see it.
Cool. All right. That's what I wanted to make sure. Yep. Small print. Yeah. Very important. So idolatry. So it's basically saying defiance. That's as bad as idolatry. So again, we're talking about the harshness of Saul's iniquity. But anyway, down here to Saul's rejection. God says, I regret that I made Saul king. He didn't follow my commands. Samuel is now dealing with all of this, whatever it is. Saul's still this, he erects a monument for himself, and he still wants to be king in that way. But we read about our new king that is coming. So who's next? Deb, is that you?
Yeah.
David is chosen.
And Yahweh said to Samuel, how long will you grieve over Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and set out. I am sending you to Jesse the Ephraimite, for I have decided on one of his sons to be king.
Okay, so Bethlehem. So he's a Bethlehemite.
Oh.
So in Judah here. So one of Jesse's sons. Okay, go ahead.
When they arrived and he saw
Eliab,
he thought, surely Yahweh's anointed stands before him. But Yahweh said to Samuel, Pay no attention to his appearance or his stature, for I have rejected him. For not as man sees, does Yahweh see. Man sees only what is visible, but Yahweh sees into the heart.
Okay, so he comes across this guy, Eliab, one of Jesse's sons, and Samuel sees him, and he must be this tall, strapping, king-looking guy, and he goes, "This must be it," right? But God says, Samuel says, "Nope, not this guy. Keep going."
Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass before Samuel. But he said, Yahweh has not chosen this one either. Next, Jesse presented Sama. And again he said, Yahweh has not chosen this one either. Thus Jesse presented seven of his sons before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, Yahweh has not chosen any of these. Then Samuel asked Jesse, are these all the boys you have? He replied, there is the youngest, he is tending the flock. And Samuel said to Jesse, send someone to bring him, for we will not sit down to eat until he gets here. So they sent and brought him. He was ruddy-cheeked, bright-eyed, and handsome. And Yahweh said, rise and anoint him, for this is the one. Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of Yahweh gripped David from that day on. Samuel then set out for Ramah.
Okay, good. So we have these opening words of David is chosen that are a little harsh. Will you grieve over Saul, that I've rejected him? Samuel, by the way, has just had to tell Saul, like, God's rejected you, all this sort of stuff. There's a lot of tension here that's going on. Samuel doesn't want to be doing this anyway. He'd rather be one of his sons being king, and now Yahweh chooses a king, but then Samuel has to reject him, and then they have to choose a new one. It's not here, but after he tells Saul, God's rejecting you as king, God says to Samuel, go choose this other king. And he says, how can I go? If Saul hears about this, he's going to kill me, right? And so God tells Samuel to lie. Take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to the Lord, to make a sacrifice feast. Meaning, lie to Saul so that he doesn't think his job is about to be replaced. So there's a lot of sort of that going on. It's this back and forth. It's sort of childish reluctance. Samuel tries to second guess God's choice among Jesse's sons, as we said, right? This must be it. This guy must be it. But God chooses someone that Samuel hasn't even had a chance to see. So you can see Samuel sort of, his importance is sort of going away, and he's not happy about it, right? Maybe if Samuel had seen David, he would have gotten it right. God doesn't give him the chance to do that. So, some of the commentators will say this is Yahweh being irrational about the choosing of kings, and Samuel taking the blame. Really important as well, in the preceding episodes that occur, in typical form of divine communication, Samuel would just sort of report what God said. And maybe there's a brief message or so of direct from God, but there's doubt in terms of Samuel is this prophet. He speaks for God, but there's a little bit of doubt. Here, this is not any doubt. There's complete authoritative transparency. Yahweh says, not this one, not this one, this one. There's a little bit more involvement, right, in this situation, okay? So David is the boy that is chosen, the shepherd, right? He's a shepherd. He is the youngest of his brothers. So we start to see a little bit of connection with Joseph, right? Okay, right. The youngest who's going to rule over the other brothers. He's this little handsome kid who's out in the shepherd turned king. It's this very sort of thing. So let's see what else. Okay, so there's a lot that occurs here. Okay, David eventually comes into Saul's court and is working with him, and there's this bad spirit of God that hang over Saul, and every time that David would play the little harp, Saul would feel better. There's all this sort of stories, which is fine, but not necessarily important to what we're talking about. But David's supposed to be this musician, and God's with him, and all these sort of stuff. But Saul is still around, and so even though he's been anointed here, sort of secretly, right? There hasn't yet been this official transition yet. Okay, Saul knows that God's rejected him. He doesn't necessarily know at that point that he's been anointed. David's been anointed. But once he does find all this out, now you have to work into the hereditary aspect. So David now becomes an heir. Okay, Pam. So,
but for the people, Saul is still the king.
Sort of. I mean, we don't know, right? I mean, yes, sort of.
Weird transition.
There's this weird transition to this. It's not going very smoothly. This transition is what's important. Okay. So 1 Sam 18:17.
Saul said to David, "Here's my older daughter Merab. I will give her to you in marriage. In return, you be my warrior and fight the battle of Yah." Saul thought, "Let not my hand strike him, let the hand of the Philistine strike him." David replied to Saul, "Who am I, and what is my life, my father's family in Israel, that I should become your majesty's son-in-law?" But at the time that Merab, daughter of Saul, should have been given to David, she was given in marriage to Adriel the Meholathite. Now, Michal, daughter of Saul, had fallen in love with David, and when this was reported to Saul, he was pleased. Saul thought, "I will give her to him, and she can serve as a snare for him, so that the Philistines may kill him." So Saul said to David, "You can become my son-in-law even now through the second one."
In other words, he said, "Marry this one." He goes, whatever. He finds the other one, Michal, and he goes, "Yeah." Now, but listen to what Saul is saying. Saul is saying, "Oh, good. I can get him in, get him close, and eventually have him killed." Because if Saul has David killed, he's still king. Okay? So then we read, event that does not work, obviously. And we go all the way, we jump forward to 2 Samuel so that we can show the end of the story here.
Sometime afterward, David inquired to Yahweh, "Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah?" Yahweh answered, "Yes." David further asked, "Which one shall I go up to?" And Yahweh replied, "To Hebron." So David went up there along with his two wives and Noam of Jezreel, and Abigail, wife of Nabal the Carmelite. David also took the men who were with him, each with his family, and they settled in the town about Hebron. The men of Judah came, and they anointed David king over the house of Judah.
Okay. Deb, will you finish this up?
David was told about the men of Jabesh Gilead who buried Saul. So David sent messengers to the men of Jabesh Gilead and said to them, "May you be blessed of Yahweh, because you performed this act of faithfulness to your lord Saul and buried him. May Yahweh in turn show you true faithfulness, and I too will reward you generously because you performed this act. Now take courage and be brave men, for your lord Saul is dead, and the house of Judah have already anointed me king over you."
Okay. What is David becomes king, unites the monarchy, and everyone sort of comes together. Okay. But what hopefully I want to show you here at the bottom of this page is the tribe maps here, and then the maps of the kingdom. Okay. So you can see where Benjamin is. Okay. The Dan Ephraim area, that becomes Israel, but you can see where Judah is. Okay, and on the back you can see a larger map of that. But you can also see in the other map here, Israel and Judah. Okay, so remember that Saul is a Benjaminite, and then David comes from Bethlehem, from Judah. Okay, so what the scholars talk about in terms of the importance of this is that these tales of Samuel and Saul and David and even Solomon are written by a school of thought that is the ideas of Deuteronomy, a group of traditionalists, most likely originating from the north, okay, from the north of Israel after the division of the monarchy when Solomon died. Okay, so the idea is the stories were written after the kingdom splits, okay, between north and south, okay, that it was written at that point, okay, after the collapse, after the collapse of the northern kingdom in 722, right, we start to read stories that came out of the south from Judah, including the conquest of Joshua and all these sort of Judah heroes and things like that. Okay, David, who is, you have a question?
No.
Okay, David, who is this epitome of the royal figure, an embodiment of the later hope for restoration, is a central figure to these writers. Okay, and the early monarchy. Okay, David captures the sympathy of the audience. You can't read about David without getting caught up in his heroic rise from shepherd boy to dynastic paragon. I mean, like, it's almost over the top sort of thing. He's this perfect, handsome, wonderful idea. So it's legendary, it's folklore, it's almost novelistic. And there are the accounts of all of this are pretty full of traditional literary materials, stylized motifs that we've seen before, sending out messengers as spies, type scenes, battle accounts, news of defeats. It sort of reads, you can point out these motifs of things within the First Samuel and Second Samuel, okay? Political actions sort of discuss that as well. The forming of the state, that he was from the tribe of Benjamin. David's political and military achievements, certainly from the south, they reign him as this amazing Judean sort of person. So again, it's about who's writing what, right? The northern writers are writing about northern people, and the southern writers are writing about southern people. Eventually, they start to come together, and you have to mix them together. Okay, a couple more notes, and then we'll sort of pull all that together in a little bit. So the thinking about these dates, these writings, about Samuel, about Saul, about David, about the beginning of the monarchy. We see Judah's claim on David, right? Think about it that way in terms of David's the hero. He comes from the south. The north is destroyed. So the Benjaminite camp, because the northern kingdom where Benjamin is in that area, right? He wasn't so good. Saul disobeyed commandments. If you recall how Israel came to be destroyed, they made a pact with the Assyrians and broke laws and stuff like that, and they got what was coming to them. But all of this, other scholars believe that, like Philip Davies suggests, that the narrative of Israel and Judah take its framework from the first history of Israel, which actually came from the tribe of Benjamin, meaning that the tribe of Benjamin started to write its history, meaning that it's possible that the story of Saul, right, came from this sort of unknown history that was in Benjamin. So overall, what they're trying to say here, what the scholars are trying to say, and if you look at these maps sort of as to how they're sort of put together, is that eventually there never was this big, huge. Instead, there were northern stories, and there were southern stories, and then there were Benjaminite stories, and they all had to be sort of pulled in together, and mixed together. So that's why you have certain little heroes and big heroes and that sort of thing. there's also a great deal of thought. Let's see, Martin North is also another great scholar, where he notes that the targets of Israel's assaults in Joshua are concentrated in Benjamin. The heroes' stories in Judges are Benjaminites. Israel's first king is Saul the Benjaminite. David focuses on the geographical centrality of Benjamin at the southern end of Israel. There's a lot of that. So we're thinking there's a lot of mention of that it maybe has come from that. Okay. Benjamin, according to Philip Davies, must have been part of Israel before 720 so that it can serve as the conduit for literature that would find its way to Judah's Bible. In other words, many of the scholars believe that Benjamin remained separate when it was a split kingdom. But it must have sort of merged itself into Israel before Israel was destroyed, because all of those stories came in and then came back down to Judah. Okay. David comes to power as an outsider. Jesse's family is located in Bethlehem, but the town really plays no role. And after Saul's death, David consolidates his power in the south by taking up residence in Hebron. Okay, and Hebron is a little bit northern there. So overall, a couple of things I want us to take away from this teaching session. One, the succession from that we've seen from sort of prophet, a lot smoother than the succession from judge to king and king to king. Okay, it's sort of rocky. We can see sort of the difference in sort of the succession and the building of a kingship, of a monarchy. Okay, there's all kinds of problems with it. There's individual issues, and what the commentators and the scholars are saying here is that what you're reading is tension between kingdom writers and northern stories and southern stories and other tribes that didn't get involved and that sort of stuff. So you're seeing the tension that was sort of put together there is a reflection upon what was being written long after, right? And that, they're still trying to figure out what happened during that time. But the idea, this is sort of folklore as to how the monarchy was built, pulling together folklore from the north and folklore from the south and from elsewhere. So the heroes have, imagine taking, 3 states that have their own birth story and having to make one, right? You get heroes from each of the states, if that makes sense, right? So if we've got like Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, right? And they're like, well, pretend that we're this one empire. Well, then Indiana has its own heroes. We need them to be in here. And Ohio says, no, we got to mention these guys. And then they get destroyed. And then, okay, Ohio's not there anymore. So Indiana and Kentucky have to build stuff. That's what you're working on with something like this here. It's really fascinating. This idea of political, the states and the influence of all of that. Questions?
What about Jerusalem? On this map, it's shown as part of Benjamin.
Yes.
Eventually, it became
Judah.
The capital of Judah.
It is. Yeah. So that was interesting to me that the dot is inside that Benjamin area there. It really is, at that point, part of Judah. At least at the end, it's part of Judah. Which is why when you look at the small map here, I know it's hard to see, but it's definitely in Judah in the purple. But what they're saying is, so then part of Benjamin must have split, parts in Israel, part in Judah. But there's all kinds of talk in the scholars now that we're learning about, and the scholars now are writing about, in terms of code names for things that maybe Benjaminites weren't Benjaminites, and maybe the evil. Maybe like the bad guys, like the Amalekites or Midianites, are code names for tribes that didn't want to be part of the United Monarchy and those sort of things. I mean, there's all kinds of tension that we start to feel if you're writing about trying to get everyone together, and not everyone wants to be a part of that big party, and you're writing your history and your folklore. You can do whatever you want. You can write whatever you want, right? But if you read 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, which I suggest that you do, in full, you'll see these sort of backs and forths, and pay attention to where the characters are from, right? Are they from the north or are they from the south? How are they portrayed? And then go back to parts in the Torah and see how those actual tribal named people, right, like Joseph's brothers, right, we're talking about, what occurs with them, right? Because the redactors eventually went back and they wanted to make their brother the best, right, their tribe the best. So if you read the Joseph story, for instance, who throws Joseph into the pit and who says we shouldn't do that, and what brother does this, Judah and Reuben and Benjamin, how are they portrayed also has another layer to it in that way. Okay.
And what's interesting is, it's like any other history. There's so many kingdoms that aren't mentioned, and it very well could be that there were players.
Yeah,
And
you never know.
political players, because we've talked about how it all gets to be in the final verses, and and only by other writings, I assume, would we know about these tensions of, somebody in Dan had influence on somebody else, and yet there are quotes from Yahweh that we have to believe.
Right. History is written by the victor, right?
Right.
So whoever writes the story gets to say, my guy's from Judah, Judah's the best, and your guy's, not so good, and he's from Benjamin. Those are the stories.
Yeah. There's this story how David is hiding from Saul, and